the Austrian Alps, 1943. A young hunter named Matthäus Hetzenauer had just been conscripted into the Wehrmacht. He was 20 years old, lean and quiet, with hands that knew the weight of a rifle before they knew the weight of a schoolbook. In the Tyrolean mountains where he grew up, missing a shot meant your family went hungry. The chamois and ibex that roamed those peaks didn't give second chances. When Hetzenauer arrived at sniper school, the instructors immediately noticed something odd about him. He didn't shoot like the other recruits. While everyone else adopted the standard prone position, taught in every military manual across Europe, Hetzenauer kept shifting his rifle. He'd cant it at unusual angles. He'd adjust his scope mount in ways that made the range officers shake their heads. He'd line up shots that looked geometrically wrong. "That's not regulation," his instructor barked during the first week. "You'll miss every time shooting like that." But Hetzenauer didn't miss. He never missed. The German military in 1943 was a machine built on precision and doctrine. Every movement had a manual. Every position had been tested and retested. The Carabiner 98K rifle that Hetzenauer carried was the product of decades of German engineering refinement. The scopes mounted on sniper variants had been calibrated to exacting standards, and the shooting positions taught to Wehrmacht snipers were based on generations of military science. Hetzenauer's instructors didn't appreciate improvisation. When he explained that he was compensating for wind drift and elevation using techniques he'd developed, hunting in mountain valleys, they told him to follow the manual. When he demonstrated that his unconventional scope positioning allowed him to acquire targets faster in certain conditions, they marked it as a deficiency in his training reports. "You shoot well despite your form, not because of it," one instructor wrote. "Needs correction before field deployment." But the Eastern Front was consuming men faster than the training schools could produce them. By late 1943, Germany needed every sniper it could get. Hetzenauer's scores were too good to ignore, even if his methods were unorthodox. In December 1943, he was assigned to the 3rd Gebirgsjäger Division, mountain troops, and sent east. The Eastern Front wasn't like the wars of maneuver that had defined the early years of the conflict. By 1944, it had become a grinding, brutal affair of attrition. Villages changed hands multiple times. Forests became graveyards. And in this landscape of constant threat, snipers became some of the most feared soldiers on either side. Soviet snipers had already proven devastatingly effective. Names like Vasily Zaitsev had become legendary. The Soviets understood that a single well-placed bullet could eliminate an officer, halt an advance, or demoralize an entire unit. The Germans, despite their initial reluctance to embrace sniper warfare on the same scale, were learning the same lessons. Hetzenauer was assigned to a unit operating in the Carpathian Mountains, terrain that reminded him of home: the rolling hills, the dense forests, the long sight lines across valleys. This was where his childhood had prepared him for war in ways no training manual could match. His first weeks in combat were unremarkable. He took standard shots at standard ranges. His company commander noted his competence but saw nothing exceptional. Then came the incident that would make military observers on both sides take notice. It was early spring 1944. Hetzenauer's unit was dug in on a hillside overlooking a valley. Soviet forces controlled the opposite ridge, approximately 1,100 meters away, just over 1,200 yards. For context, that's 12 football fields placed end to end. At that distance, a man looks like a tiny speck. Even with a scope, identifying rank or equipment is nearly impossible. The German forward observers had been tracking Soviet movement for days. They'd identified what appeared to be a command post on the far ridge. officers came and went. Radio equipment was visible. It was clearly a nerve center for Soviet operations in the sector. The problem was the distance. Standard doctrine said that effective sniper range was 400 to 600 meters, maybe 800 in ideal conditions with an exceptional shooter. At 1,000 to 100 meters, you weren't just fighting distance. You were fighting wind, elevation drop, the Earth's rotation, temperature variations, and the basic limits of your optics and ammunition. Hetzenauer's company commander had brought up the command post in a briefing. Intelligence wants that position neutralized. Artillery can't get the angle. If anyone thinks they can make a shot from here, speak up. Nobody spoke. 1,200 yards wasn't a shot. It was a miracle. Hetzenauer waited until the briefing ended, then approached his commander privately. "I can make that shot." The commander looked at him like he'd lost his mind. "Hetzenauer, that's over 1,000 meters." "I know the distance, sir. With bullet drop at that range, you'd be aiming at the clouds." "I've calculated the drop, sir, and the wind. I can make the shot." The commander studied him. Hetzenauer wasn't boasting. He wasn't even confident in the way young soldiers are when they don't know what they're talking about. He was simply stating a fact. The way a carpenter tells you a beam will support weight, or an engineer tells you a bridge will hold. "Show me your setup," the commander said. What Hetzenauer showed him violated several items in the official sniper manual. He'd modified his scope mount, not dramatically, but enough that it sat at a slightly different angle than regulation specified. He'd made minute adjustments to the windage knob that went beyond the standard calibration. Most unusually, he planned to shoot from a position that wasn't quite prone and wasn't quite sitting, a hybrid stance he'd developed for extreme angle shooting in the mountains. "This isn't regulation," the commander said. "No, sir, but it works." The commander made a decision that probably saved his career and possibly changed Hetzenauer's life. "Make the shot. If you can prove this works, I'll document it. If you can't, you'll follow standard procedure from now on." Hetzenauer waited for the right conditions. Not just any moment would work. He needed the wind to be steady, not gusting. He needed the temperature to be stable. He needed the light to be at an angle where he could see through the scope without glare, but his target would be clearly visible. 3 days later, the conditions aligned. Soviet officers had gathered at the command post. Through his scope, Hetzenauer could make out general shapes, uniforms, the distinct silhouette of an officer's cap, the gestures of men giving orders. One figure stood apart from the others. Taller, more animated, clearly in command. Hetzenauer settled into his modified position. Other soldiers in his unit had gathered to watch, though at this distance they wouldn't see much. The target was barely visible to the naked eye. He made his calculations. At 1,100 meters, with standard 7.92 by 57 millimeter Mauser ammunition, the bullet would drop approximately 31 meters over 100 feet. That meant aiming at a point far above the target. Wind was moderate, blowing left to right at perhaps 15 kilometers per hour. That required additional adjustment. Temperature was cool, which meant the air was denser, which meant more drag on the bullet. All of this had to be computed, not on paper, but through experience and instinct developed over thousands of hours in the mountains. The mathematics of external ballistics are complex. Hetzenauer understood them not through formal education, but through the deep, intuitive knowledge that comes from reading wind in tree branches and judging distance by sound echoes in valleys. He adjusted his scope to what looked, to any observer, like an absurdly high angle. Through the lens, he was aiming at empty sky above the distant ridge, but in his mind, he was tracking the arc of the bullet, seeing its path through space and time. He controlled his breathing, slow, steady. Between heartbeats, there's a moment of perfect stillness. That's when you take the shot. The carabiner, 98K, barked. The sound echoed across the valley, and then there was waiting. At 1,100 meters, it takes a bullet roughly 1.5 seconds to reach the target. That's an eternity when you're trying to hit a human-sized target at extreme range. Through his scope, Hetzenauer saw the Soviet commander drop. The other officers scattered. Confusion erupted on the far ridge. They had no idea where the shot came from. The sound had echoed off multiple surfaces. For all they knew, they'd been hit by artillery or a nearby sniper. Hetzenauer's commander confirmed the hit through binoculars. "My God, you actually did it." Word spread quickly. A 1,100-meter kill wasn't just rare. It was nearly unheard of. This was before modern optics, before ballistic computers, before any of the technology that makes extreme-range shooting possible today. This was a man, a rifle, and mathematics done in his head based on feel and experience. The German High Command took notice. Hetzenauer was called to demonstrate his technique to senior officers. Some were skeptical. One colonel accused him of luck. So Hetzenauer made another extreme-range shot under observation, and then another. And what the brass discovered was that Hetzenauer hadn't gotten lucky. He developed a genuine innovation in sniper technique, born from his experience in alpine hunting. His scope positioning allowed for faster compensation at extreme ranges. His hybrid shooting stance provided better stability on uneven terrain. His method of reading wind and elevation came from years of tracking animals that moved unpredictably through mountain valleys. The manual was wrong, or at least incomplete. The regulation shooting positions were optimized for flat terrain at moderate ranges. Hetzenauer had intuited what military science would later confirm, that extreme-range precision shooting requires adaptations that can't be standardized because they depend on the shooter's physical proportions, the terrain, and countless micro-variables. The bans and corrections were quietly dropped. Other snipers in the mountain divisions were encouraged to study his methods, but here's the reality. Most couldn't replicate what he did. Hetzenauer's technique required not just knowledge, but a kind of embodied understanding that can't be taught in a classroom. You either had the feel for it or you didn't. Over the following months, Hetzenauer continued his work on the Eastern Front. His confirmed kill count climbed steadily. The final tally documented in Wehrmacht records was 345 confirmed kills. That made him the second highest-scoring German sniper of the entire war, behind only Josef Allerberger. But it's the 1,100-meter shot that military historians still study. It remained the longest confirmed sniper kill of World War II. It wouldn't be surpassed until the modern era, with improved optics and ammunition. In the context of 1944, with the technology available, it was nearly impossible. After the war, Hetzenauer rarely spoke about his service. Like many veterans, he found the attention uncomfortable. He returned to Austria, worked as a carpenter, and lived quietly until his death in 2004. He never wrote a memoir. He never sought recognition. The mountains that had taught him to shoot also taught him humility. The rifle that made that shot, a standard carabiner 98K with a Zeiss ZF4 scope, was lost to history. Thousands of similar rifles were produced during the war. Without serial number records, there's no way to identify which specific weapon Hetzenauer used. It's probably rusting in a forgotten storage depot somewhere, or was destroyed decades ago, its significance unknown. But the shot itself remains in the historical record. Multiple witnesses, official documentation, post-war analysis by military historians. It happened. A 21-year-old Austrian hunter, using techniques that had been banned as improper, made an impossible shot across a Ukrainian valley and changed how military planners thought about long-range precision fire. There's a broader lesson in Hetzenauer's story, one that extends beyond sniper tactics. Innovation often comes from the margins, from people who haven't been properly trained to know what's impossible. The military establishment had decades of doctrine telling them how snipers should shoot. Hetzenauer had different knowledge, born from a different kind of necessity, and he trusted it even when experts told him he was wrong. That kind of independent thinking can be dangerous in military organizations built on discipline and standardization. But sometimes, in the chaos of war, the improviser who breaks the rules is exactly what's needed. Hetzenauer was both a product of military training and a challenge to it. He succeeded not despite his unorthodox methods, but because of them. Today, military snipers around the world train for extreme-range shots that would have seemed impossible in 1944. Technology has advanced enormously. Modern rifles are more accurate. Scopes are more powerful. Ballistic computers can calculate in microseconds what Hetzenauer had to intuit. The current record for longest confirmed sniper kill is over 3,500 meters, made by a Canadian Special Forces operator in 2017. But Hetzenauer's 1,100-meter shot, made with World War II-era equipment and self-taught techniques, remains one of the most impressive feats of marksmanship in military history. It's a reminder that sometimes the most important factor in any technology isn't the hardware, it's the human using it. The young man from the Tyrolean Alps, who taught himself to shoot by necessity, who trusted his own judgment over military doctrine, who made an impossible shot across a Ukrainian valley, he represents something essential about the nature of skill. True mastery isn't just following the manual, it's understanding the principles so deeply that you know when to break the rules. His story survives, not because he was trying to become famous, but because he was trying to solve a problem. The problem happened to be at 1,200 yards, and the solution happened to change military history. If you want to join us on this mission, please subscribe and turn on notifications. And finally, we have one question we always ask. Where are you watching from? Our community stretches across the entire globe, from the United States to the United Kingdom, from Canada to Australia. You're not just a viewer. You're part of a community keeping these memories alive. Please drop a comment and let us know your city or state, and tell us if someone in your family served. These stories of innovation and courage on the battlefield deserve to be remembered, and your engagement helps ensure that the remarkable achievements of soldiers like Matthäus Hetzenauer are never forgotten. Thank you for watching,